Imagine waking in utter darkness, wrists raw from iron shackles, the air thick with the stench of despair and unwashed souls. You're no longer a free man, a father, a musician, but a ghost in a system built to devour your very name. This isn't a nightmare, it's the divine test Solomon Northup faced, where one false step meant eternal damnation in the fields of hell. But what if his survival whispered of a higher justice, waiting to strike? In the shadowed annals of American history, where the echoes of whips and auction blocks still linger like unholy specters, Solomon Northup's tale emerges not merely as a story of survival, but as a profound parable of the soul's unyielding quest for redemption amidst the abyss of human sin. It's a narrative steeped in the moral quagmire of a nation divided, where freedom was a fragile illusion for some, and divine retribution loomed over the oppressors like an unseen storm. Solomon's journey begins not in the cotton-choked plantations of Louisiana, but in the deceptive serenity of Saratoga Springs, New York, a place where mineral waters bubbled up from the earth like false promises of healing, drawing the elite to bask in luxury while ignoring the undercurrents of injustice flowing southward. Picture the town in the crisp thaw of March 1841, snow-dusted rooftops glistening under a pale sun, the air crisp with the scent of pine from the Adirondack foothills. Horse-drawn carriages clatter over cobblestone streets, their wheels kicking up mud flecked with melting ice. Grand hotels like the United States and Congress Hall rise like opulent temples, their marble facades reflecting gas lamps that flicker like watchful eyes in the twilight. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast golden hues over ballrooms where silk gowns swirl to the rhythm of waltzes, and the laughter of the wealthy drowns out the distant rumble of trains carrying goods, and sometimes, whispers of human cargo, to distant ports. Saratoga was a haven of prosperity, built on the backs of forgotten labors, a microcosm of America's hypocritical soul, a land proclaiming liberty while chains bound millions in the shadows. Amid this veneer of civility lived Solomon Northup, a man whose very existence challenged the era's rigid hierarchies. At 33, he stood with a quiet dignity, his frame sturdy from years of canal work and farm labor in his youth, now refined by the delicate precision of a violinist's hands. His skin, a warm brown hue, bore the legacy of his father, Mintus Northup, a former slave emancipated by a master's dying whim in the 1790s, an act that felt less like mercy and more like a reluctant nod from fate. Mintus had instilled in Solomon the sacred weight of freedom, not just a legal status, but a divine gift, fragile as a flame in a gale. Guard it like your soul, his father had warned, teaching him to read scripture by candlelight, where verses from Exodus spoke of liberation from bondage, and psalms whispered of justice raining down on the wicked. Solomon's eyes, sharp and introspective, held the depth of a man who had pondered life's inequities. He dressed modestly, a wool coat mended at the elbows, boots polished to a shine that belied their wear, but carried himself with an aura of quiet authority. His violin, a polished mahogany instrument inherited from his father, was more than a tool, it was a conduit to the divine, its strings vibrating with melodies that evoked the heavens' lament for the oppressed. He played at weddings where vows echoed like fragile covenants, at political rallies where speeches thundered about democracy while ignoring the enslaved, and in the opulent hotels where patrons sipped champagne, oblivious to the moral rot festering in the nation's heart. His home, a modest wooden cottage on the outskirts of town, was a sanctuary of warmth against the world's chill. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the aroma of Anne's baking, cornbread laced with molasses, stews simmering with herbs from their small garden. And Hampton Northup, his wife of 12 years, was a pillar of resilience, her mixed heritage granting her a beauty that blended the earth's tones, dark curls framing a face etched with quiet wisdom, hands calloused from kneading dough yet gentle in cradling their children. She descended from a free black mother and a white father, a union that symbolized the blurred lines of America's sins, love-defying hate, yet forever marked by it. And worked as a cook in the grand estates, her recipes infused with flavors from African roots and European influences, each dish a quiet act of defiance, nourishing bodies while her spirit yearned for true equality. Their children were the beating heart of this fragile Eden. Elizabeth, 12, with her mother's keen eyes and a laugh like tinkling bells, helped in the kitchen, her small hands chopping vegetables while reciting Bible verses about the meek inheriting the earth. Margaret, 10, was the dreamer, her quiet demeanor hiding a fierce curiosity. She sketched flowers in the margins of Solomon's sheet music, symbols of fleeting beauty in a harsh world. Alonzo, 7, mirrored his father's energy, fiddling with a toy violin, his chubby fingers stumbling over strings that promised future symphonies. Family evenings were sacred rituals, Solomon reading from the Bible by the hearth's glow, flames dancing shadows on the walls like omens of trials to come. They attended the Baptist church, a humble wooden structure where hymns rose like prayers for deliverance, mingling with the congregation's whispers of kidnappings in the north, free souls vanishing into the night, sold into eternal servitude. This life, though modest, pulsed with a spiritual richness. Solomon owned his home outright, a testament to thrift and divine favor, its deed a paper shield against prejudice. Yet, beneath the surface lurked the era's demons. New York's gradual abolition in 1827 had freed many, but racism lingered like a curse. Free blacks could own property, sue in court, even vote if wealthy enough, but these rights were illusions, easily shattered. Solomon knew the tales: kidnappers prowling border states, luring the unwary with promises, only to deliver them to auction blocks where humanity was priced like cattle. He carried his free papers always, a yellow document from the county clerk, sealed with wax, detailing his birth in Minerva, New York, in 1808, his free status. Inherited from his father. It was his talisman, inscribed with bureaucratic script that felt like holy writ, proof against the devil's snares. But temptation arrived cloaked in opportunity, as it often does in biblical lore. Late March brought a thaw, rivers swelling with meltwater, mirroring the restless stirrings in Solomon's soul. Work was scarce in winter's tale, and had secured a cooking post in Sandy Hill, 30 miles north, leaving the children with kin. Solomon pondered providence, how to provide, how to honor the commandment to care for one's family. Then came the strangers, Merrill Brown and Abram Hamilton, appearing like serpents in the garden. Well dressed in tailored coats and polished boots, they exuded charm, their accents a blend of northern polish and southern drawl. They claimed affiliation with the traveling circus acrobats leaping through hoops, horses prancing under tents lit by oil lamps, crowds gasping in delight. "We've heard of your violin mastery, Mr. Northup," Brown said, his smile revealing even teeth, eyes glinting like coins. $1 a day, expenses paid. A short tour, Albany, New York City, down to Washington. Back before April's bloom. Hamilton nodded, producing references scribbled on fine paper, names of musicians who'd allegedly prospered. The offer gleamed like forbidden fruit: steady pay to bolster the family's coffers, a chance to perform beyond Saratoga's confines. Solomon consulted in that evening, the fire crackling as if issuing warnings. "Can you trust them?" she asked, her voice a soft anchor, hands folding laundry with deliberate care. "No contract? Strangers from afar?" He reassured her, invoking faith, "The Lord watches over the righteous. My papers are my shield." Yet doubt flickered in her eyes, a maternal intuition sensing shadows. Still, practicality won. The money would secure their future, perhaps even expand their home. Solomon packed, spare clothes folded neatly, violin nestled in its case like a sleeping child, free papers tucked into his breast pocket, their ink a promise of return. March 20th dawned gray, a fine mist veiling the hills. Solomon kissed in, her lips warm against the chill, then hugged the children. Elizabeth's embrace fierce, Margaret's shy, Alonzo's giggling. "I'll write from Washington," he promised, voice steady despite the unease coiling in his gut. The stagecoach awaited, Brown and Hamilton clapping him on the back like old friends. As Saratoga faded behind, Solomon gazed at the receding spires, unaware that this departure echoed Judas's betrayal, a kiss leading to crucifixion. The journey southward unfolded like a deceptive dream. Stagecoaches rattled over rutted roads, wheels splashing through puddles that reflected fractured skies. In Albany, they performed in a smoky hall, Solomon's violin weaving melodies that drew applause, coins clinking into his palm. Brown and Hamilton paid promptly, their laughter easy, sharing tales of circus wonders, elephants trumpeting, clowns tumbling. Steamboats carried them down the Hudson, the water's surface rippling like silk under sunlight, past verdant shores where farms sprawled, hiding the North's complicity in southern sins. New York City assaulted the senses, docks teeming with sailors shouting in foreign tongues, the stench of fish and tar mingling with fresh-baked bread from vendors' carts. They lodged in a harborside inn, rooms dim with tallow candlelight, beds sagging but clean. Performances in taverns, crowds of merchants and laborers, Solomon's bow dancing across strings, evoking joy amid the din of clinking glasses. No hint of malice, the men treated him as an equal, toasting his talent. Yet, in quiet moments, Solomon prayed, fingers tracing the Bible in his bag, seeking assurance in Proverbs: "The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion." Onward to Washington, D.C., via coastal steamer, waves lapping the hull like whispered temptations. The Potomac River gleamed under April's tentative sun, leading to a city of contradictions, a beacon of liberty stained by bondage. Grand edifices rose, the Capitol's dome unfinished, symbolizing a nation's incomplete soul, the White House pristine white, hiding debates over slavery's expansion. But beneath, muddy avenues churned by wagons, air heavy with wood smoke and the faint, acrid scent of despair from hidden pens. Washington, in 1841, was a hub of the domestic slave trade, pens dotting the landscape like sores on the body politic. Enslaved people marched in coffles, chains rattling like accusatory bells, bound for cotton kingdoms where souls withered under the sun's merciless gaze. Solomon sensed the shift, the air thicker with unspoken threats. Yet his companions remained affable, securing rooms in a modest hotel near the Capitol, its lobby echoing with politicians' murmurs. On their second evening, March 24, they proposed a celebratory dinner at a nearby tavern, wooden beams low overhead, tables scarred from years of use, lanterns casting flickering shadows that danced like demons. To success, Hamilton toasted, pouring wine that gleamed ruby in the glass. Solomon sipped sparingly, the vintage tart on his tongue, warmth spreading unnaturally fast. Conversation flowed, tales of future gigs, laughter echoing. But then a wave of dizziness, the room tilting like a ship in storm. Heat flushed his face, vision blurring. Fresh air, he muttered, rising unsteadily. Hands gripped his arms, supportive, or so it seemed. The night air hit like a slap, streets spinning, gas lamps streaking into halos. Solomon stumbled, world dissolving into blackness, a void that swallowed his prayers. Was this the wages of trust? A divine warning ignored? Awakening came in torment, head pounding like a blacksmith's hammer, mouth cotton dry, body aching on cold stone. Darkness enveloped him, broken by faint moonlight seeping through barred slits high on the wall. Chains, iron cuffs biting into wrists and ankles, links clinking with every shift, a symphony of captivity. The air reeked, sweat, urine, moldy straw, the metallic tang of blood. Groans echoed from shadows, other forms huddled on the floor, their breaths ragged prayers for mercy. Solomon's heart thundered, panic rising like bile. "Where am I?" he croaked, voice hoarse, echoing off damp walls. Footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. A door creaked open, lantern light stabbing the gloom, revealing a man, James H. Birch, slave trader, his face a mask of calculated indifference, jowls heavy, eyes cold as winter steel, clad in a fine suit that mocked the squalor. "Your name?" Birch demanded, voice flat, a quill poised over a ledger like a judge's gavel. "Solomon Northup," he gasped, reality crashing in waves. "Free man from New York. My papers, there's been a mistake. Contact my family, the sheriff in Saratoga." Birch's laugh was a low rumble, devoid of mirth. "No mistake, boy. You're Platt now. Runaway from Georgia. Papers? Lies get lashes." He gestured to a burly overseer, whip coiled at his belt, eyes gleaming with sadistic glee. Solomon protested, chains rattling like accusations, but Birch's words struck deeper. "This is William's slave pen, less than a mile from the Capitol where freedom's laws are written yet ignored." The pen was a fortress of despair, brick walls thick as sin, rooms partitioned into cells where hope died slowly. Food was meager, cornmeal mush congealed in tin bowls, water brackish from barrels. Surveillance constant, guards patrolling with lanterns, their boots thudding like heartbeats of doom. Demoralization was the true chain, whispers of auctions, families torn asunder, the lash for defiance. In that fetid darkness, Solomon's mind reeled, grappling with betrayal's sting. Brown and Hamilton Judases, selling him for silver, drugging his wine with opium or worse. His free papers? Stolen, vanished like smoke. Alone, stripped of identity, he knelt on the cold floor, whispering psalms, "Deliver me from my enemies, O my God, protect me from those who rise up against me." Was this divine trial, like Job's afflictions, testing his faith? Or punishment for complacency in a world rife with evil? As days blurred into agony, Solomon witnessed horrors that seared his soul, a mother clutching her child, tears carving tracks on dirt-streaked cheeks, only to be separated at dawn's cruel light. Men broken, eyes hollow with resignation, muttering of plantations where the sun-baked flesh and overseers wielded whips like instruments of wrath. The spiritual weight crushed him, slavery not just physical bondage, but a theft of the divine spark, reducing God's image to chattel. Yet, amid dread, a flicker, remembrance. He was Solomon, not Platt. Father, husband, musician. This identity, etched in his spirit, became his anchor, a quiet rebellion against erasure. Curiosity gnawed. How had they chosen him? Coincidence, or targeted sin? Empathy swelled for his fellow captives, their stories weaving a tapestry of injustice, freemen kidnapped, runaways recaptured, all funneled south to feed the cotton beast. Dread built like storm clouds, transport loomed, to Louisiana's bayous where escape meant death by swamp or hound. Reflection haunted him, America's hypocrisy, proclaiming all men created equal while forging chains in liberty's shadow. Divine retribution? Perhaps the nation's sins would one day erupt, as prophets foretold. But hope, that eternal flame, whispered. Solomon plotted in silence, mind sharpening like a blade. He would endure, document, expose. This was no mere survival, it was a quest for redemption, a testament that even in hell's depths, the soul could cry out for justice. Pause for dramatic effect, subtle violin swell fading to silence. The machinery of slavery ground on, indifferent to one man's pleas. Birch prepared manifests, valuing lives in dollars. Solomon listed as Platt, prime field hand, $700. Guards herded them into coffles, chains linking ankles in a macabre dance. Solomon's heart ached for home, and's face in dreams, children's laughter echoing like lost hymns. As they marched toward the ship, the capital loomed mocking, seat of power, blind to the sin at its feet. Boarding the brig Orleans, a vessel reeking of tar and despair, Solomon gazed at the receding shore. Waves lapped hungrily, carrying him deeper into the maw. Spiritual chills gripped him. Was this the Red Sea parting in reverse, leading to bondage? Or a path to witness, like Moses in Pharaoh's court? In the hold, crammed with bodies, air-stifling, he befriended others. Elias, a kidnapped freeman, Robert, feverish with resolve. They whispered plans, but fate intervened, smallpox ravaged, claiming lives like offerings. Solomon nursed the sick, hands steady, invoking healing prayers. Survival felt providential, a sign his story must be told. New Orleans awaited, bustling port, air humid with jasmine and rot, auction blocks where souls were bartered under Spanish moss-draped oaks. Solomon, rechristened Platt Hamilton by a new trader, Theophilus Freeman, a name twisting like irony, faced the block. Stripped, prodded like livestock, his dignity assaulted. Bitters-eyed muscles, teeth, scars absent from free life. Sold to William Ford, a Baptist preacher with kind eyes but complicit hands, for $1,000. Ford's plantation in the Great Pine Woods, red soil underfoot, pines towering like silent judges, air resinous and still. Ford treated slaves with relative mercy, no gratuitous whips, Sunday sermons preaching obedience as divine will. Solomon labored as carpenter, skills shining, building trust. Yet, irony burned, Ford read scripture of love thy neighbor while owning brethren. Spiritual tension mounted. Solomon pondered hypocrisy, guilt shadowing his master's soul. Conflict arose with overseer John Tibiats, a petty tyrant, face twisted in perpetual sneer, whip cracking like thunder. Clashes escalated, Tibiats' incompetence exposed, rage boiling. One dawn, axe raised in threat, Solomon disarmed him, wrestling in mud, strength born of righteous fury. Lashed to stakes, sun-blistering skin, he hung crucified, toes scraping earth in agony. Hours blurred, thirst of fire, visions of family hallucinated. Ford's intervention saved him, but the scar etched deeper, divine justice delayed, but inevitable? Leased to Edwin Epps, the true devil incarnate. Epps' Bayou Birth Plantation, cotton fields endless as purgatory, sun a merciless eye, air humming with mosquitoes like demons. Epps, drunken and cruel, Bible in one hand, lash in other, twisted scripture to justify atrocities. Patsy, young enslaved woman, Epps' obsession, whipped for imagined slights, her screams piercing nights like cries to heaven. Solomon's days, dawn trumpet blaring, backbent picking cotton, quotas impossible, failure met with stripes. Sensory hell, thorns pricking fingers bloody, sweat stinging eyes, overseer's bellows echoing. Evenings, huddled in cabins, thatch leaking rain, cornmeal rations meager. Yet, spirit endured, secret violin playing soothed souls, melodies carrying prayers for deliverance. Psychological depths, guilt over survival while others perished, sin of complicity in silence. Biblical symbolism abounded, Epps as Pharaoh, Solomon as exile, waiting for Exodus. Redemption glimmered in Canadian carpenter Samuel Bay's anti-slavery voice, risking all to carry a letter north. The letter, scrawled in secrecy, ink from berries, paper pilfered. Bay's journey, evading interception, a miracle chain. Arrival in Saratoga, allies mobilizing, legal wheels turning. In 1853, after 12 years, freedom's agents arrived, Epps raging, but law prevailing. Release, chains falling, like Peter's in Acts. Return home, and aged, children grown, embrace tear-soaked. Memoir 12 Years a Slave, expose shaking foundations, fueling abolition. Legacy, haunting, whispering of unresolved sins, divine retribution in Civil War's fires. Solomon's escape, not luck, but testament to soul's resilience, a chilling reminder that justice, though slow, is inexorable. The dim confines of James H. Birch's slave pen clung to Solomon Northup like a shroud woven from despair itself, the air heavy with the metallic bite of rusting chains and the sour tang of fear-soaked sweat. Stone walls, slick with condensation from the Potomac's humid breath, rose around him like the unyielding barriers of a biblical prison reminiscent of Joseph's pit, where innocence was cast into shadow by betrayal's hand. Lantern light seeped through the barred window high above, casting elongated shadows that danced mockingly across the floor, as if the very darkness conspired to mock his pleas. Solomon's body throbbed from the awakening haze, wrists and ankles chafed raw by irons that bit deeper with every futile twist, a constant reminder of his fall from grace. He had recited his truth to Birch with the fervor of a prophet, his home in Saratoga Springs, a modest haven where hearth fires crackled with familial warmth, his wife and her steady gaze at anchor in stormy seas, his children Elizabeth's bright curiosity, Margaret's gentle dreams, Alonzo's infectious energy. He named the pillars of his world, judges like Henry Z. Hayner, merchants such as Cephas Parker, officials who had shaken his hand and heard his violin sing at gatherings. "My free papers," he demanded, voice cracking like thunder in the confined space, issued by the Saratoga County clerk, sealed and true, they prove I am no slave, but a freeborn man of New York. Birch, that embodiment of calculated evil, a man in his 40s with a face etched by years of profiting from human misery, his eyes flat as polished coins, listened without a flicker of empathy. His suit, tailored and pristine amid the filth, spoke of a prosperity built on shattered lives, a modern Pharisee cloaked in legality. He departed wordlessly, the door's heavy thud echoing like a final judgment, only to return with reinforcements, 2 burly assistants, their sleeves rolled up like executioners, and a wooden paddle broad as a plank, its surface scarred from countless corrections. What ensued was no mere punishment but a ritual of annihilation, designed to strip the soul as surely as the flesh. The paddle descended with rhythmic fury, each blow landing on Solomon's back and thighs like the wrath of an unjust god, splitting skin and drawing blood that pooled warm and sticky on the straw-strewn floor. Pain exploded in waves, a fiery torrent that blurred vision and muffled cries, until consciousness mercifully fled, leaving him in a void where even dreams dared not intrude. Awakening hours later, Solomon lay in a crumpled heap, every breath a lance through his ribs, his shirt torn and crusted with dried blood. The welts rose like ridges of accusation, purple and swollen, a map of brutality etched onto his body. As the fog of agony lifted enough for thought to pierce through, the full horror unfurled like a poisoned scroll. The wine at that fateful tavern dinner, ruby red and deceptively smooth, had been tainted, laced with laudanum or some opiate brew by Brown and Hamilton's treacherous hands. While he slumbered in drugged oblivion, they had rifled his pockets, seizing his free papers, those sacred parchments that bore the weight of his liberty. Sold to Birch for a pittance, perhaps 30 pieces of silver in this modern betrayal, Solomon now existed only as Platt, a fabricated runaway from Georgia, backed by forged bills of sale that the law would honor without question. His word, the testimony of a black man in a white man's court, held no more substance than dust in the wind. Even if a message winged its way north, to Anne's worried heart or the ears of Saratoga's elite, Birch's documents would prevail, ironclad shields in a system engineered to protect the oppressor, not the oppressed. Whispers from fellow captives, huddled in the gloom like ghosts in Hades, confirmed the nightmare's depth. This was no aberration but a well-oiled machine of sin, kidnappers prowling northern streets, luring free blacks with honeyed promises of work, only to deliver them into chains. Accomplices, tavern keepers, false employers, formed a web of complicity, destroying papers and inventing histories to launder human souls into property. Once ensnared, victims vanished southward, swallowed by the maw of plantations where cries for justice dissolved into the humid air. The law, that supposed bastion of righteousness, offered no sanctuary. In Washington and beyond, black testimony was inadmissible against whites, a deliberate blindness that echoed the biblical curse of Ham, twisted to justify eternal subjugation. Solomon's spirit recoiled, grappling with the moral abyss. How could a nation founded on liberty's hymn perpetuate such darkness? It was as if divine justice slumbered, allowing the wicked to prosper, testing the faithful like Job amid his afflictions. For 2 interminable weeks, Solomon endured Birch's domain, a forge where wills were bent and broken. Twice more the lash visited him, not in random rage but with surgical precision, to erode defiance, to instill the hollowite compliance that fetched higher prices at market. The overseers wielded whips of braided leather, cracking like thunderclaps, each stripe a sermon on submission. Solomon learned swiftly, overt resistance invited death. Survival demanded cunning, a mask of docility veiling the unquenched fire within. He drew from scriptural wells, Daniel in the lion's den, preserving faith in silence, Paul in chains, plotting escape through intellect. Externally, he became Platt, head bowed, responses curt. Internally, he recited his true name like a mantra, a spiritual armor against erasure. The pen's routines ground on meager rations of cornmeal mush, slopped into tin bowls with the indifference of feeding swine, nights pierced by sobs and fevered mutterings, days of enforced idleness, where minds fermented in isolation's brew. In early April 1841, the chains led outward. Solomon, shackled ankle to ankle with 40 others, a coffle of the damned, marched through Washington's sun-dappled streets, past the Capitol's marble facade gleaming like a hypocritical temple, government offices buzzing with liberty's rhetoric, citizens averting eyes or nodding approval. The domestic slave trade paraded openly, a normalized abomination that stained the nation's soul. In Richmond, Virginia, another pen awaited, iron-barred cells echoing with auctioneers' chants, the air thick with tobacco smoke and despair. Days blurred into waiting, then boarding the brig Orleans, a vessel of torment bound for New Orleans. Below decks, the hold was a suffocating tomb, bodies crammed like cordwood, the ceiling so low that sitting upright invited bruises. Heat baked the air, mingling sweat, vomit, and the reek of overflowing slop buckets. Rations were scant, hard biscuits crawling with weevils, brackish water that burned the throat. Illness swept like a plague, feverish coughs, delirious moans. A young woman, frail and hollow-cheeked, succumbed first, her body hauled topside and consigned to the waves with a splash that echoed eternal loss. An elder followed, his spirit yielding where his flesh could not, discarded overboard without right or remorse, a stark emblem of slavery's dehumanizing calculus, lives as expendable cargo, souls uncounted in heaven's ledger. Solomon watched from his fettered corner, the ship's timbers creaking like accusatory bones. Waves slapping the hull in rhythmic judgment. This voyage was a descent into Gehenna, where humanity dissolved into economic units. Yet, amid the horror, he clung to remembrance, Anne's touch, the children's laughter, Saratoga's crisp air, a spiritual lifeline, defying the system's intent to reduce him to nothingness. Faith whispered, as God parted the Red Sea for the Israelites, so might Providence carve a path through this watery exile. New Orleans materialized in late April, a fever dream of commerce and vice. The port throbbed with life, docks groaning under cotton bales, sugar casks, and human freight, streets alive with Creole chatter, the scent of jambalaya mingling with the rot of the Mississippi's edge. The slave market, near the wharves, was a bazaar of brutality, open yards flanked by brick warehouses, where traders like Theophilus Freeman paraded their stock. Solomon and his companions were herded in, scrubbed raw with coarse brushes, issued threadbare clothes that itched against healing welts. Freeman, a sharp-featured opportunist with a ledger's soul, barked instructions: stand tall, look lively, buyers want vigor, not vinegar. Inspections followed, prospective owners probing teeth like horse traders, squeezing muscles, quizzing on skills. Solomon navigated with calculated restraint, his intelligence a double-edged sword, too sharp, and it bred suspicion, too dull, and value plummeted. In early May, the gavel fell. William Ford, a Baptist preacher from Bayou Boeuf, purchased him for $1,000, a sum that weighed Solomon's frame like a yoke. Ford's demeanor hinted at mercy, a tall man with kind eyes shadowed by moral compromise, his voice softened by scripture. The journey to his plantation spanned days, by steamboat up winding bayous, waters murky as sin, then wagon over rutted trails through cypress swamps where Spanish moss hung like spectral veils, alligators lurking in the shallows. with primordial patience. The heat oppressed, a wet blanket that sapped strength, insects buzzing like demonic swarms. Ford's domain emerged, vast pine forests whispering secrets, a lumber mill humming with saw's whine, slave quarters of rough-hewn logs leaking rain and hope alike. Work commenced at dawn's first blush, felling pines, their resinous scent sharp in the nostrils, axes biting wood with rhythmic thuds. Solomon's strength shone, earning Ford's nod. He supervised crews, devised efficiencies, his mind a quiet rebellion. Ford preached Sundays under oak canopies, verses of love and obedience twisted to sanctify chains, his slaves seated on logs, heads bowed in enforced piety. Yet, contradictions festered. Ford's humanity stopped at freedom's door, his faith a veneer over ownership's rot. Solomon pondered revelation, might he confide? But observation revealed the trap. Ford's prosperity hinged on slavery, his soul entangled in its web. Risk loomed like a noose. Betrayal could mean resale to cruelties untold. Late 1842 brought upheaval, Ford's debts mounted, expansions souring like manna turned wormy. Creditors circled, forcing sales. Solomon, collateral in a tangled loan, passed to John Tibiats, a carpenter of volatile temper, his face a perpetual storm cloud, eyes narrowed in perpetual grievance. Tibiats embodied slavery's raw venom, beatings for whims, his whip an extension of rage. Hostility targeted Solomon, sensing the veiled intellect beneath the facade. Tension simmered, erupting in summer 1843 over a fence's construction, a minor quibble inflated to pretext. Tibiats' lash descended. Solomon, spirit ignited like Elijah's fire, wrested it away, strikes landing in self-preservation's fury. The act, heroic yet damning, invited death. Louisiana law decreed execution for such defiance. Tibiats fetched rope, intent on lynching. Solomon fled into the swamp's embrace, water lapping waist high, mud sucking at boots like grasping sins. Night fell, a velvet cloak pierced by reptilian hisses, alligator eyes glowing like infernal coals. Exhaustion clawed, but dawn brought desperate resolve. Return to Ford, pleading protection. Ford, retaining partial claim, brokered uneasy peace. Solomon resold to Edwin Epps, survival's bitter fruit. Epps' plantation in Bayou Boeuf was isolation's kingdom, cotton fields stretching to hazy horizons, air humming with cicadas' dirge, soil red as blood underfoot. Epps, wiry and wrathful, rose from poverty on slavery's ladder, viewing bondsmen as beasts of burden. His regime, quotas of 200 pounds daily, waited dusk under lanterns' glare, shortfalls met with lashes 1 per pound, skin splitting like parchment. Cotton picking was torment's art, bulls pricked fingers bloody, sun-scorched necks, backs bent in perpetual genuflection. Solomon adapted, the whippings marked his early failures, each stripe a scar on body and soul. Psychological chains bound tighter, Epps sowed distrust, rewarding snitches, forcing mutual floggings, complicity's poison. Sexual tyranny reigned, especially over Patsy, a beauty of ethereal grace and picker supreme, harvesting 500 pounds daily. Epps' lust assaulted her relentlessly, his wife Mary's jealousy channeling into viciousness, demands for Patsy's punishment, her screams echoing like banshees in the night. Solomon witnessed this distortion, relationships warped by power's corrosion, a microcosm of slavery's spiritual cancer. Years dragged like chains, fields at dawn, trumpets blare shattering sleep, evenings in cabins. Thatch dripping, rations of corn and pork fat sustaining bare life. Solomon observed outsiders, transient whites bringing whispers of the world. Escape seed germinated, not flight through deadly swamps, patrolled by bounty hunters under laws demanding passes, but a message northward, defying the Fugitive Slave Act's clause. Internally, faith armored him, memories as psalms, identity a divine covenant unbroken. The system, legal barriers, physical perils rendered traditional flight suicidal. Runaways returned broken, families sundered as retribution. Solomon endured, a silent sentinel, awaiting providence's hand in this valley of shadows, where divine vengeance simmered unseen, promising reckoning for the unrepentant. In the suffocating cradle of Edwin Epps' plantation, where the air hung heavy with the scent of blooming cotton and the sharper tang of human despair, Solomon Northup, known only as Platt to the world that had stolen him, wrested a new form of resistance from the jaws of impossibility. Physical escape was a fool's delusion. The bayous teemed with alligators whose ancient eyes gleamed like fallen angels, patrollers roamed with bloodhounds trained to savor the scent of desperation, and Louisiana's iron laws demanded passes for any black traveler, turning every road into a potential gallows. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 loomed like a northern betrayal, empowering even free states to drag runaways back to hell. No, flight meant death, swift by bullet or slow by lash. But another path flickered in Solomon's mind, a biblical cunning born of years in the wilderness, not to flee the system, but to prove he had never belonged to it. To summon proof from the north, his free papers, witnesses to his vanished life, that he was Solomon Northup, citizen, father, freeborn son of New York. All he needed was a messenger willing to defy the gods of slavery. Yet the barriers rose like the walls of Jericho, unyielding and profane. Literacy was his hidden treasure, a dangerous gift. To reveal it invited sail to the deeper South's rice swamps or a quiet grave. He could not scribe the plea himself. Trusting fellow enslaved souls risked betrayal, fear or torture could loosen tongues, and Epps' whip had broken stronger spirits. Local whites were woven into the plantation's fabric, overseers, neighbors, traders, all guardians of the peculiar institution. Quick to report uppity slaves for reward. Solomon needed an outsider, a wanderer untouched by Louisiana's poisoned soil, someone whose moral compass pointed true north, even at peril of life. For nearly a decade, no such angel appeared. Providence seemed deaf to his silent prayers, the heavens brass above the cotton rose. Then, in the sweltering summer of 1852, as cicadas droned their endless dirge and the sun baked the earth into cracked clay, a stranger arrived. Samuel Bass, a Canadian carpenter in his late 40s, tall and gaunt as a prophet from the wilderness, with gray-streaked hair tousled by wind and a face weathered like old cedar, lines etched deep from years under open skies. Born across the border where slavery's shadow fell lighter, Bass had roamed the South as an itinerant builder, his skilled hands crafting homes for the very men whose wealth rested on broken backs. But his tongue was unguarded fire, an abolitionist in a land where such words were heresy. He decried slavery as a triple sin against God, whose image dwelt in every soul, against humanity, degrading enslaver and enslaved alike, against reason, for free labor would outpace chains and time. In Louisiana, where cotton was king and dissent treason, Bass views invited tar and feathers, exile, or worse. Yet he spoke them boldly, quoting scripture's calls for justice, the Declaration's self-evident truths, even economic folly, his voice alone trumpet in Gomorrah. Epps hired him in late July to expand the big house, a project demanding weeks. Bass established a makeshift shop near the quarters, sawdust swirling in humid breezes, the rhythmic thunk of hammer on nail echoing like a heartbeat of change. He labored mostly alone, but enlisted enslaved hands for heavy lifts, speaking to them with a courtesy rare as rain and drought, "Thank you, sir," or "Hold steady there," words that acknowledged humanity where others saw only property. Solomon observed from the field's edge, sweat-stinging eyes, hands raw from bowls, heart cautious as a deer at water's edge. He noted Bass' gentleness, the absence of casual slurs. Evenings brought revelations. After supper, whiskey loosening tongues, Bass and Epps clashed under the veranda's lantern glow. Solomon, tasked with chores nearby, overheard it all, the air thick with pipe smoke and tension. "Slavery is an abomination before the Lord," Bass thundered one night, voice gravelly with conviction, glass in hand. "It corrupts the master more than the slave, turning men into beasts. The Bible commands do unto others, not own them." Epps, face flushed with liquor and rage, countered with twisted verses, Ham's curse, Paul's exhortations to obedience, the South's sacred economy. "Niggers ain't fit for freedom, they need the rod, like children." Bass parried fiercely, citing Exodus deliverance, Christ's love for the lowly. The argument crescendoed until Epps snarled, "Shut your damn Yankee mouth or get off my land." Bass drained his glass, muttered foolhardened like Pharaoh, and resumed work at dawn, unbowed. These clashes stirred Solomon's soul like a long dormant wind. Hope flickered, terrifying, intoxicating. But doubt not, abolitionist words were cheap in the North, action here could mean death. If he confided in Bass betrayed intentionally or under pressure, Epps would unleash hell, flogging until flesh hung in strips, sail to a sugar plantation where life expectancy withered to months. Weeks passed in vigilant study, Bass sharing water with laborers on scorching days, wincing at Patsy's screams during whippings, solitary moments where his eyes reflected quiet sorrow. Solomon weighed the man's soul, praying for discernment as David sought God's will before battle. Conviction grew. Bass was no poseur, but a man whose faith demanded deeds. Late August brought decision, the air heavy with impending rain, thunder rumbling like divine commentary. One twilight, as Epps rode to town and the plantation settled into uneasy quiet, Solomon approached the workshop. Lantern light flickered on bass tools, sawdust motes dancing like spirits. Heart hammering against ribs, mouth dry as cotton dust, Solomon spoke softly, "Master Bass, what part of the country do you hail from?" Bass paused, plane in hand, brow furrowing at the unexpected query from a slave. "Canada, originally." "Why do you ask, Platt?" The plunge: "I've served Master Epps many years, but I was not born to this. I was born free in New York. Kidnapped in Washington, papers stolen. My true name is Solomon Northup. I have a wife, children waiting." Words tumbled, rehearsed yet raw, fear sharpening every syllable. Silence stretched, thick as swamp fog. Bass eyes blue-gray, piercing, held unreadable depths. Solomon's blood roared, terror crested, mistake, betrayal imminent. Then, softly, "Tell me your story." "All of it." Relief flooded like baptismal waters. Solomon poured forth, Saratoga's mineral springs bubbling like promises, violin melodies in grand hotels, Anne's warm embrace, children's laughter echoing in memory, the treacherous offer from Brown and Hamilton, drugged wine's betrayal, Birch's pen, Ford's conflicted kindness, Tibiat's near murder, Epps' decade of torment. Names, dates, places cascaded: Henry Z. Hayner the judge, Cephas Parker the shopkeeper, the Baptist church congregation. He spoke near an hour, voice steadying with truth's power, bass listening rapt, face shifting from shock to righteous fury. Questions followed, probing like a lawyer's, exact addresses, children's ages, papers' descriptions. Finally, bass exhaled, leaning against the workbench as if burdened by the tale's weight. "If this be true, and God help me, I believe it, you've endured a crime that cries to heaven for vengeance. I've railed against this evil for years, but words are wind. If I can aid you, I will." Hope surged, painful in intensity, like light piercing long darkness. "How?" Solomon whispered. Bass pondered, eyes distant. "Letters. I'll write to those you named, merchants, lawyers in Saratoga. Detail your plight, your marks, this hellish place. Urge them to seek proof and alert authorities. I'll sign my name, post from Marksville to evade suspicion." Danger loomed, interception meant ruin for both. "Epps finds out." "I know the risk," Bass cut in, voice firm as oak. "But faith without works is dead." Time I lived my convictions. Secret meetings followed over days, stolen moments in the shop or field's fringe, Epps distracted. Bass scribed meticulously, ink from a hidden bottle, paper procured in town. Letters addressed to Cephas Parker, William Perry, others whose memories might stir. Content vivid: Solomon's appearance, medium height, strong build, intelligent eyes, abduction circumstances, current bondage on Bayou Burf. Please urgent, verify, mobilize, rescue. Bass funded postage from his wages, mailing discreetly during supply runs. He cautioned patience: months may pass. Letters stray, men forget. But we've acted, God's hand may guide. Early September, Bass completed the edition, fresh pine boards gleaming, and departed, wages in pocket, conscience aflame. Solomon watched the wagon recede down the muddy road, dust swirling like fading dreams, wondering if this was farewell or prelude to miracle. Waiting became exquisite torture, each day a crucifixion of hope deferred. Dawn trumpet summoned to fields, cotton bolls burst white under relentless sun, thorns drawing blood-like. Accusations. Hands blistered, back bowed, Solomon picked mechanically, quotas haunting, short pounds equaling lashes under Epps' drunken gaze. Nights in the cabin, hard earth floor, thin blanket against chill, mind racing while others snored exhaustion sleep. Hope warred with dread: had letters arrived? Believed? And aged now, perhaps remarried in grief? Children grown strangers? Or had silence swallowed his cry? October-November peaked the season, cooler air mocking sweat-soaked toil, fields white unto harvest, Epps driving mercilessly for maximum yield. A transient laborer arrived briefly, sparking futile wonder: was he emissary? No recognition, only departure. December slackened labor, fence mending, land clearing, but Epps' winter moods darkened, bottle his companion, lash his scepter. 3 months sans word, hope ebbed like tide, despair whispering permanence.
Unbeknownst to Solomon, far north in frost-kissed Saratoga, Providence stirred. One letter reached Cephas Parker, shopkeeper whose memory held Solomon dear.
Horror gripped him. He bore it to Henry Bliss Northup, lawyer, kinsman to the man who'd freed Mintus decades prior. Henry, early 50s, white-haired yet vigorous, respected in legal circles, felt familial duty ignite. Reading base script by lamplight, belief came instant. Solomon's 1841 Vanishing, long suspected foul play, now confirmed. But faith demanded action against formidable odds.
Louisiana guarded property jealously, New York's reach ended at borders.
Henry petitioned Governor Washington Hunt, base letter, affidavits from dozens, and tearful testimony, neighbors swearing to Solomon's freedom, property deeds, voting records, reconstructed free papers preserved by Ann's vigil.
Argument compelling, state obligation to rescue kidnapped citizen. Hunt, amid national tensions, compromise fraying, abolition fires rising, weighed politics. Yet evidence overwhelmed. Late November, he commissioned Henry agent of the state, documents authorizing retrieval, courteous request to Louisiana, knowing enforcement tenuous. Henry departed December's chill, trains clattering south, steamboats churning rivers, satchel heavy with proofs, original papers copy, affidavit sealed, governor's seal gleaming. Funds for contingencies, lawyers, perhaps inducements.
New Orleans, consulted sympathetic attorney versed in manumission suits, rare victories, but possible with irrefutable evidence.
Challenge, locating Platt in Bayou Burf's vastness, swamps swallowing roads, plantations isolated.
Days of inquiries, taverns, stores, ferries.
Late December, a local pointed, Epps Place, that way.
As Henry approached through mist-shrouded cypress, Solomon toiled unaware, hands in red dirt, soul clinging to fading ember. Divine retribution, long delayed, drew nigh like the angel passing over Egypt, marking one house for deliverance amid widespread judgment. The chain of miracles, base courage, letters survival, Parker's memory, Henry's resolve, Hunt's decree, forged by unseen hands, prepared to snap earthly bonds. Redemption's dawn crept closer, chilling the air with sacred promise. On the crisp dawn of January 1, 1853, as frost silvered the cotton stubble and the bayou mists rose like departing spirits, a wagon rattled up the rutted lane to Edwin Epps' plantation. Henry Bliss Northup, tall, resolute, his face etched deeper by 12 intervening years and the weight of sacred duty, stepped down, boots sinking into the red clay that had drunk so much blood and sweat. He carried a leather satchel heavy with destiny, seals from the governor of New York, affidavits like arrows of light, and a resolve forged in familial obligation and moral fire. The air hummed with unspoken tension, even the cicadas seemed hushed, as if creation held its breath. Deep in the fields, Solomon Northup, still called Platt by the world that had devoured his name, bent beneath the winter tasks, clearing brush under the overseer's watchful glare. Word rippled through the quarters like a miracle whispered, a white man at the big house, asking not for Platt, but for Solomon Northup. Terror seized him first. Had Epps uncovered base letters? Was this the prelude to a flogging fatal at last? But the name, his true name, spoken aloud after 12 years of burial, ignited a spark that raced through his veins like holy fire. Heart pounding against ribs scarred by lashes, he walked toward the house with measured steps, face a mask of servitude, while inside hope and dread wrestled like Jacob with the angel. There, in the yard ringed by live oaks draped in resurrection fern, stood Henry Northup, gray at the temples now, coat dusted from travel, eyes sharp with purpose. Solomon neared, and their gazes locked. Across the chasm of lost years. Recognition dawned mutual and electric. Henry's nod was subtle, a covenant sealed without words. Everything tilted, the world remade in an instant. The chains were not yet broken, but Solomon felt them loosen, as if an invisible hand had already begun turning the key. The confrontation erupted immediately, raw as an open wound. Epps emerged from the veranda, wiry frame taut with suspicion, face twisted in habitual scowl, whiskey's feints and clinging like accusation. "What business you got with my nigger?" he snarled, voice thick with the venom of a man whose god was ownership. Henry remained composed, voice steady as a judge's gavel. "I act under authority of the state of New York. The man you call Platt is Solomon Northup, free citizen, kidnapped and unlawfully enslaved. I present Governor Hunt's commission and demand his release into my custody." Epps' laugh was a bark of defiance, echoing the South's wounded pride. He brandished his own papers, bills of sale inked in commerce's cold blood, claiming legal title through a chain reaching back to New Orleans' auction block.
Louisiana law says he's mine, bought fair. No Yankee meddler gonna steal my property.
Rage flushed his cheeks. To him, this was invasion, abolitionist blasphemy threatening sacred order.
Henry, anticipating the wall of hostility, revealed his preparation, a hearing already secured before Judge Robert Wharton in Marksville, 2 days hence.
Louisiana, for all its guardianship of slavery, permitted suits for wrongful enslavement rare as mercy, burdensome as Sinai's tablets, yet possible. Epps fumed, cursing northern interference, but law's thin veneer compelled compliance. January 3 dawned gray and portentous. Epps conveyed Solomon to Marksville in sullen silence, accompanied by his attorney, a local defender of property rights, face smug with confidence in home soil. The courthouse, a modest brick edifice on the town's dusty square, overflowed with spectators, planters in broad-brimmed hats, merchants, curious wives, white faces uniformly hostile, murmuring of abolitionist tricks and nigger lies. The air crackled with threat. Solomon felt their stares like brands, understanding the deck stacked as surely as Pharaoh's magicians against Moses. Judge Orton presided from the bench, 60s, weathered by Louisiana son-in-law, no friend to emancipation yet bound by procedural honor.
He opened proceedings with grave neutrality.
Henry Northup unfolded his case like a scroll of judgment. First, Solomon's original free papers, yellowed but authentic, bearing Saratoga County's seals, declaring him born free in 1808 to emancipated Mintus.
Affidavits followed in solemn procession, Cephas Parker's merchant testimony, neighbors attesting to Solomon's violin at weddings, officials confirming property ownership and civic respect.
Anne's statement, heartrending, preserved through widow-like vigil, detailed the 1841 departure with circus men and Vanishing.
Base letter crowned the evidence, a Canadian's righteous account pinpointing Bayou Burf's captive.
Epps' counsel countered with Commerce's ledger, bills tracing Platt from Freeman in New Orleans through Ford to Epps, arguing unbroken legal title. 12 years he served without protest. Why now this fable?
Coached by meddlers to undermine our institution.
He painted Solomon as ingratiate, escape neglected because freedom was fiction. Henry parried masterfully, isolation's geography, swamps deadly, patrols vigilant, legal shackles, the fugitive slave act's northern teeth, black testimony's inadmissibility, papers destroyed in Birch's pen.
Survival itself testifies to his character, Henry declared. A lesser spirit would have broken. Then, the unexpected masterstroke. Henry requested Solomon play the violin. Objections flew. Irrelevant theater. But curiosity swayed Orton.
A borrowed instrument appeared, its maple body gleaming like reclaimed soul.
Solomon cradled it, fingers trembling not from fear but memory's flood.
12 years since freely drawing bow across strings, now, in this hostile sanctuary, music would plead where words might fail. He began softly, a Saratoga waltz from the 1830s, notes lilting like Mineral Springs bubble, evoking ballrooms where silk swirled under chandeliers.
Skill flowed pure, precise intonation, expressive phrasing born of disciplined artistry, not field-hand improvisation.
Silence gripped the room, even Epps' scowl softened momentarily.
Piece followed piece, reels, contradances known in northern parlors, alien to Louisiana ears. The violin wept and sang, a voice from Solomon's buried life testifying, this is no ordinary slave. This is a musician whose talent no trader would cultivate for cotton fields. Bow stilled. Silence lingered, sacred.
Henry spoke into it, no field hand placed thus.
This is Solomon Northup, violinist to Saratoga's elite, stolen from freedom's embrace.
Orton questioned Solomon directly, full name, wife's maiden, children's births, home's exact plot, associates' names.
Answers cascaded precise, woven with detail only truth could thread.
The judge pondered documents, free papers versus fraudulent sales, then ruled.
Voice firm, evidence compels. Solomon Northup is freeborn, illegally enslaved.
Bills of sale, though facially valid, rest on kidnapping sin. He is discharged forthwith.
Pandemonium. Epps roared outrage, travesty. Abolitionists poison justice. Vowing appeals. Spectators muttered threats.
But Orton's order stood, appeals would crawl through courts while Solomon walked free. January 4, 1853, Solomon Northup stepped from Marksville Courthouse into chilling air, a free man after 12 years, 9 months, 15 days of abyss.
Sunlight struck his face unmediated by ownership's shadow.
He breathed liberty's intoxicating draft, knees nearly buckling under joy's weight. The northward odyssey spanned nearly 2 weeks, wagon to Red River steamboats, Mississippi's mighty flow to Cairo, then rails through free states to Albany, finally staged to Saratoga. Each mile surreal, sitting unchained, speaking without sir, choosing meals. Yet danger shadowed, fugitive slave axe hunters prowled even north.
Henry remained guardian, recording Solomon's full testimony, recognizing its prophetic power. Saratoga arrival, bitter January cold, snow crunching underfoot.
Solomon had wired ahead, and waited, faith rewarded against despair's siege. Door opened, she collapsed weeping into his arms, scent of home hearth enveloping like grace. Children, grown strangers yet blood, Elizabeth 24, mother herself, Margaret 22, wed, Alonzo 19, strong youth.
Embraces tentative then fierce, rebuilding began amid tears and tales. News spread like wildfire. Visitors thronged, joy, curiosity, skepticism. Some doubted, runaway inventing excuses. But documentation silenced, Orton's decree, affidavits, Henry's witness. Soon approached David Wilson, attorney, writer, abolitionist ally, proposing collaboration.
Solomon dictated, Wilson shaped. 12 Years a Slave emerged summer 1853, unflinching chronicle naming kidnappers, Brown, Hamilton aliases, traitors, Birch, Freeman, Masters, Ford's conflicted mercy.
Epps' demonic cruelty.
Economics dissected, violence vivid, Patsy's torments searing pages. Psychological warfare exposed, soul's daily fight against erasure. Published, it exploded 30,000 copies in 3 years, rivaling Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Newspapers reviewed, abolitionists wielded as sword. Concrete proof of kidnapping's machinery, law's complicity, slavery's soul murder.
Yet justice earthly faltered. 1854, Solomon testified in Washington against Birch.
But D.C. law barred black testimony against whites. Acquitted.
Brown and Hamilton ghosts, aliases shielding continued predation.
Devastation struck, yet impact rippled.
Minds changed, Northern resolve hardened against slavery's spread.
Solomon lectured churches, meetings, voice steady, recounting horrors, urging righteousness. Later years blur into mystery. Mid-1850s lectures documented, then silence post-1857.
No death record, no grave confirmed. Speculation, illness from slavery's toll, flight to Canada escaping re-kidnapping, or, chillingly, second abduction by vengeful traitors.
This vanishing echoes his story's core, freedom's fragility for black Americans, ease of erasure, thousands lost unheard. Solomon's survival and testimony, a miracle defying probability, whispers divine intervention, a spark preserved to illuminate sin's darkness. His legacy endures, haunting as unanswered prayer.
The violin silenced too soon, yet its final courtroom note resonates through history, a cry for justice delayed but inevitable. As Civil War's retribution loomed, Solomon's words fueled the storm. And somewhere, in heaven's ledger, the unpunished may yet face reckoning. For every Solomon reclaimed, countless vanished. Their silence accuses us still. What chains, subtler, modern, bind souls today? Reflect. Remember. The fight for true freedom continues.